Hey Jack, I'm back, and with me another speed art. This one is of old Willy Wonka. Wonka has certainly changed a lot through the years, and since I just released his animation a little while back, I want to go through all his main designs from first to worst. Oh wait, flip that, reverse it, worst to first. This will be including some of the musical versions, the live action versions, as well as the cartoon versions. So without any more gobbledygook, let's just get to it. Coming in last is Tom and Jerry Wonka, which is mostly a retread of the Gene Wilder Wonka, so it's fun enough design-wise, but it loses for the lack of originality. Show me something weird or different. Stop copying a 50-year-old film. In 18th is the Greek Broadway Wonka. This look to me seems a little lazy compared to the other Broadway versions. He seems to be wearing a bathrobe and his hair, while silver, like the novel, doesn't really give him the old man look, but instead a silver hipster type look, which is fine but doesn't really work for me personally. 17th goes to the too cutesy looking Sunmark Wonka, as well as the live action Mark Sweet version of this same Wonka. It's just a little too clean cut and there's just a little too much purple going on for my liking. It's just, I don't know, too cutesy. Like those rosy cheeks are a little too much. 16 goes to the Breaker mascot Wonka, and for similar reasons to the last version, it falls here. It has a little more going for it, but the cartoon version is too friendly looking and a little too derivative of the 1971 film, although the live action Mark Sweet version is a little bit more unique here, which is why it falls a little higher on the list. The Service Now Wonka slides into 15th. He's again mostly aping the 1971 version, but does change a little bit more than the Tom and Jerry film, so it's a little higher here, but for the most part it's just a weaker imitation. The Brazilian Broadway Wonka comes in at 14th, and he has a lot of pinkish purple to him, but I think the tie-dye gives it a much needed splash of originality, and it does help it to pop quite a bit. Next up is the modernish redesign of Nestle Wonka. It's more or less a cutesier version of the 90s mascot they used, but has a darker coloring, although I feel like he lacks the edge of the 90s version, and you know what? I'm all about living on the edge, so show me a little bit of grit here, please and thank you. In 12th is the UK Touring Wonka. This one had a splash of orange and actually features his facial hair, and I think he seems just wonky enough to be a good Wonka. And it's really quite a different design for him, so that's kind of why it's a bit higher than some of the other Broadway ones so far. And speaking of unique Broadway takes, the Japanese version falls in 11th. He's probably the most unique Broadway version. His hat looks like it's made of chocolate, the long silver hair, and the large bow tie is a nice nod to the novel, so that one wins big for originality. Rounding into the 10th spot is the Danish Broadway Wonka. I like how dark and creepy this version seems. The dark hair, the patterned suit, it's all a nice touch, and I think perfectly blends some of the more horror elements that I think Wonka has. To me, the Danish one is just like the perfect sweet spot between scary and welcoming. The opera version is in 9th. This version somewhat blends the two movie versions together, but has its own spin, so it kind of feels fresh, although I've never watched the opera version, so I can't really say exactly how he acts or anything, but I just kind of like this look. The French version takes 8th place. Now this version is quite derivative of the 2005 Johnny Depp look, but it looks like he just added a whole bunch of color, which really helps to make it feel more fun, a little more like the welcoming novel version. So it's just a nice mix of the modern with the classic to me. Landing in lucky number 11 is the hard to find Swedish Wonka. I like how short this Wonka is, like the novel, and how his hat is so tall to compensate. And from the clips that have survived, he seems like a nice but kinda creepy Wonka, which I like a lot. The Norway Broadway Wonka is going to take 6th place. He looks basically like the Riddler, which is fun, and while it's maybe not the most original design ever, it's quite different for Wonka, and the bleach blonde hair really pops against the green outfit, so I really like what this one has going on. Coming into the top 5 is 2023's Wonka. This is a little bit more of a scuffed looking design, but I like how it seems like it's sort of pieced together over the years and certain things don't fit as well as they should, and it's a little messy, but for this take on Wonka, it works very well. It also helps that Timothée Chalamet adds a certain whimsy that hasn't really been seen in other versions so much. So if you haven't seen this new movie, and it's still in theaters near you, go out and check it out. It's actually really good. Or if it's not in theaters and it's coming to streaming soon, or to VOD or whatever, check that out too. I think you guys will really dig it. The original Broadway design is at number 4. This design is mostly a take on the book, and because there hasn't really been one done, it almost seems sort of fresh here, although a lot of the subsequent musical versions do sort of follow this design, but it works well in live action, so I can see why they kind of followed it. It's just nice to see the book version sort of brought to life. Now let's get into the top 3 with the 1990s Nestle Wonka, which I'm gonna lump in with all its variants here, including the stop motion and the UK one, since they basically follow the same look. And while it does feel somewhat like a Gene Wilder spin on the character, I think it does enough of its own thing to make it feel sort of like a classic Wonka, and a little bit of new, and when I remember the commercials playing between Beast Wars and Digimon, it just takes me right back. In second is Johnny Depp's Wonka from the 2005 film. Not only do I like this movie a lot, I think Depp's take is super interesting. The look is sometimes compared to Michael Jackson, but I think it works as a Howard Hawks type shut-in mixed with a game show host type persona, which is what I believe Depp and Burton were kind of going for. It's also a modern, darker look for his outfit and does things so differently from the 1971 version that it's hard to compare. But I like the streamlined nature and the added dash of red and blacks to the outfit. But coming in at number 1 is Gene Wilder's 1971 look. It's just iconic. The purple and the browns and the flowery shirt add a lot while not being too flashy, but it's really how Gene plays the character puts this take at number 1. There's something both warm and alluring, but also deeply frightening to his take of Wonka, which I think is just the perfect blend for this type of character. And while I think I prefer Johnny Depp's movie, I think this Wonka is just all around a classic. So that's why it's at number 1. So that is my ranking of the Willy Wonka designs. Well, most of them. Feel free to leave your own ranking below or tell me what your favorite or least favorite is. And if you haven't seen it, check out the newest videos on Adobe Animate, one going through Willy Wonka's evolution. And until next time, I've been Aaron, and I'll tell you something later. And big shout out to Patrick Spencer and Amino for joining the Patreon recently. Check out those links down below, and I'll talk to you guys later.